Before Narsil was broken, a kingdom was broken. Before the Line of Elendil was scattered, it was tested. Before the Shards fell at the feet of Sauron, something in the heart of Numenor had already begun to divide. Today then, we go backward, not away from the sword, but towards its first meaning. Toward a great island kingdom lifted from the sea. Toward a civilization that received much, and slowly came to believe that what was given was owed. In this first episode, we will walk through 5 movements. The gift of Númenor, the slow fracture, the voice that lied, the faithful who remained, and the downfall that began a line in exile. This series is not only about power, it is about inheritance. So let us begin with the sea. Númenor begins, like many of Tolkien's most luminous things, as a gift. When the long war at last had ended, the Edain, those men who stood with the elves in the elder struggle against the great enemy, were given an island realm in the sea. It was not seized. It was not built upon conquest. It was bestowed. And that matters. Because the first truth of Númenor is gratitude. This was a kingdom founded not on ambition, but on grace. A land set apart. A place of beauty, learning, craftsmanship, stature, memory. A people stronger and wiser than other men, and long-lived as well. Not immortal, no, never immortal, but granted years beyond the common measure of the world. Tolkien describes Númenor in a Calabeth, with that characteristic mingling of majesty and sorrow that already hints at what is to come. The Númenorians were given not only a land, but a boundary. They might sail east, they might travel widely, they might increase in skill and renown, but they were forbidden to sail into the uttermost west, toward the undying lands. The ban of the Valar stood over them, not as cruelty, but as order. It was a reminder that there was a difference between the life of men and the life of the Eldar. A difference not meant to humiliate them, but to preserve truth. Mortality was not a punishment newly invented for men. It belonged to their nature from the beginning. It was, in Tolkien's deep theology, mysterious, even called a gift in certain contexts, though a gift darkened by fear after the fall. And here, quietly, the first seed of later sorrow appears. And so the island flourishes, the people grow in wisdom and strength, their ships move over the sea like emblems of order, their cities rise white and high. Their memory remains long, their speech is noble, their lineages are honoured, their kings descend from Elros, brother of Elrond, and so even in their blood there is a kind of nearness to wonder. But every great corruption in Tolkien's world begins not only with evil entering from outside, but with the good becoming restless inside itself. A gift becomes dangerous when it is mistaken for a right. And so a question began to form beneath the surface of their lives, not just spoken aloud, but felt. What would remain when their years come to an end? Númenor did not begin in darkness. That is why its fall matters. It began in splendour. It began in favour. It began with memory. The fear of death began to deepen among the Númenorians, not because they suddenly discovered mortality, but because they began to dwell upon it differently. Their long years, once accepted as gift enough, no longer satisfied. Tolkien tells us that the Númenorians fell under the shadow. That phrase is so characteristic of him. The shadow is not merely military threat, it is spiritual dimming, a loss of proportion, a bending of the soul away from what is true and toward what is desired. Their knowledge grows, but not their wisdom. Their might increases, but not their peace. Their splendour remains visible, yet beneath it, something sour begins to harden. Death is no longer accepted as the shape of their condition. It becomes an insult, an affront, a theft. The kingdom divides. On one side are those later called the faithful, those who remember the old friendship with the Eldar, the old reverence, the old humility before the order of things. The other are the king's men, those who turn increasingly from the Valar, from the West, from gratitude, and towards domination, resentment and pride. There is a terrible irony in the story of Numenor. The mightiest realm of men is not conquered by force of arms. It opens itself to ruin through counsel. Sauron, defeated in war and brought as prisoner to the island, does not remain a captive for long. He understands too well the weakness already at work in the kingdom. He does not need to create them. He only needs to name them persuasively, to flatter what has already grown proud, to intensify what has already grown fearful, to offer language to resentment. This is one of Tolkien's deepest insights into evil. It is often more persuasive than violent at first. It prefers suggestion to compulsion. It likes to inhibit the vocabulary of reason, justice, and destiny. He suggests that what the Valar withheld was not wisdom, but jealousy. And once that thought takes root, once divine order is recast as divine selfishness, rebellion begins to feel righteous. That is how great lies work. They do not merely deny the truth, they rearrange it. They speak near the truth, but against its meaning. And Numenor listens. Under this influence, the old reverence is replaced by sacrilege. Worship turns towards Morgoth. Temple and ritual become instruments not of praise, but of terror. Once fear of death becomes absolute, people will kill in the name of escaping it. Once power becomes a god, human lives become fuel. Ar-Pharazôn, the king, launches the final rebellion. He sails westward, seeking by force what can never be taken by force: immortality. It is mortality itself trying to storm the borders of eternity. And then the world changes. The sea rises. The great island is swallowed. Numenor sinks beneath the waves, its towers, its pride, and its violence all drawn down into the abyss. This is judgment shaped like revelation. A people who fear death above all are consumed by it. But Tolkien rarely allows darkness to become total. Even in decline, there are remnants. Even under shadow, there are those who remember. Amid the destruction, 9 ships are borne away on the wind. Elendil and his sons do not escape because they are stronger, but because they remained oriented toward what was true. They do not carry the kingdom intact, they carry fragments. The fruit from the white tree, a handful of scrolls, a memory of the West. Middle-earth will not receive Numenor in its splendour. It will receive it in remnant form. The greatest things are often not preserved whole, they are carried over in brokenness. So we return now to the broken sword. Perhaps we will see it differently now. Not yet has the blade shattered beneath Elendil's body. Not yet has the shards carried through the long, wandering years of the Rangers. We see it as a symbol of a kingdom that had already broken inward before the sea ever touched it. The line of Elendil begins now, not in victory, but in exile. The ships do not arrive in triumph. They came out of storm and shadow, driven by a wind that carried both memory and loss. Grey waters behind them, an empty horizon where a kingdom had once stood. Elendil stepped onto the shores of Middle-earth, not as a king restored, but as a man who had watched his whole world die. That matters, because it changes how we understand everything that follows. He did not begin with power, he begins with absence. And yet, even here, something has not been lost. Not the kingdom, not its power, but the quiet conviction that what was given must not simply disappear. That even in ruin, something must remain. No towers, no courts, no inheritance intact, only what could be carried. His sons stood beside him, Isildur and Anarion, not as princes of a living realm, but as heirs of something broken. And somewhere, among what they had brought with them, was a memory that could not be drowned. The memory of what Numenor had been, and what it had become. There is a quiet weight in Tolkien's survivors. They do not speak loudly of what they have endured. They do not define themselves by loss, but they carry it. And in Elendil, that burden becomes the beginning of kingship. They did not rebuild Numenor. That is the first thing to understand. It would have been easy, even natural to try, to raise towers in the same image, to shape the land into something familiar, to reclaim, as far as they could, what the sea had taken. But Tolkien does not write restoration as repetition. What is lost is not simply restored by copying its form. Instead, something quieter happens. The land was empty when they came ashore. No towers waiting for them. No memory lived in the soil. No voice answered when they called the names of what had been. Only wind, only distance, only the long silence after loss. And in that silence, something had to be decided. Not how to rebuild what was gone, but whether anything would be carried forward at all. Elendil stood upon the shore, not as a king crowned, not as a ruler secured in his inheritance, but as a man who had seen his world end. and now face the future that did not yet exist. Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place I will abide, and my heirs, unto the ending of the world. In the north, Elendil establishes Arnor, a kingdom wide but less enduring. In the south, his sons Isildur and Anarion raise Gondor, a realm of stone and watchfulness, nearer to the shadow that still lingers. Two kingdoms, not one. Already, the inheritance has changed. What was once whole must now be carried in parts. But this division is not weakness, it is honesty. A broken inheritance cannot be restored by pretending it is unbroken. It must be shaped according to what remains. And so the white tree is planted again, a living echo of Nimloth, the tree saved in the final days of Numenor. Not the same tree, not the same land, but still alive. Time passes, the new realms grow, not as vast as Numenor, not as secure, but real. And yet the shadow has not vanished, because the darkness that corrupted Numenor still remains in Middle-earth. Sauron has returned to power, and now the question becomes unavoidable. What does a king do when the evil that destroyed his world rises again? Elendil could have remained. He could have ruled in peace, guarding what little remained, protecting his people from afar. He had already lost enough. But Tolkien's kings are not defined by preservation alone. They are defined by what they choose to stand against. So Elendil forms an alliance with the elves, with Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth, men and elves together, not in memory of the past, but in defiance of what still remains. The armies gather. They approach Mordor, a land shaped by will, not by gift. And at last, the moment comes. The Dark Lord himself emerges, not as shadow alone, but in form, and Elendil stands before him. We are not given every detail of that moment. Tolkien does not linger in spectacle, but what we are told is enough. Elendil and Gil-galad together confront Sauron, and in that confrontation both are slain. Elendil falls, and beneath him the sword breaks. Narsil, the blade that had been carried across the sea, the symbol of a line that endured the fall of a kingdom, is shattered. It is a stark image. The king lies fallen, the sword lies broken, and yet this is not defeat, because in that very moment Sauron is overthrown, his body cast down, his power broken. Victory begins at the moment the king falls. We expect triumph to preserve. We expect victories to secure. But here, victory costs everything. The blade that struck the blow does not survive it. The king who stood against darkness does not live to see its end. Fracture and triumph arrive together. A son steps forward, Isildur stands where his father fell. Before him, the broken sword, the fallen king, the enemy cast down. There is no pause for understanding. Inheritance does not wait. He takes up the hilt shard of Narsil, and with it he cuts the ring from Sauron's hand. It is an act of completion, but not yet of comprehension. Because what he receives in that moment is more than victory. He receives the full weight of what his father carried. Grief, responsibility, a broken symbol, a choice not yet understood. So what remains of Elendil? No throne, no long reign, no peaceful end. Instead, a fall, a broken sword, a son left to carry what he could not finish. And yet, Tolkien does not present this as a tragedy alone, because Elendil does not fall in retreat. He does not fall in despair. He falls standing, facing the very darkness that destroyed his world. In the next episode, we turn to Isildur, not simply the man who failed, but the son who inherited more than he could yet bear. The sword broke beneath him. The king was gone. And at that same moment, almost without pause, a son stepped forward. Tonight, we remain with that son. Not to excuse him, not to condemn him too quickly, but to understand the weight of the moment in which he stood, and the grief that shaped the choice he made. The field does not feel like triumph. The great shadow has been struck down, but the air is still heavy with ruin, and the silence after battle is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of exhaustion, of smoke, of the dead lying where they fell, of a world that has survived but not yet understood the cost of its survival. And there, where the war has reached its terrible height, Isildur stands beside his father. Elendil lies broken. Narsil lies broken. The king who had come out of the sea, who had spoken of remaining, who had founded realms in exile and stood against Sauron himself, is now a body on the ground. This is where Isildur's remembered choice begins. Not in a council chamber, not in a calm space of moral clarity, not in the distance from grief that lets later generations speak easily about what should have been done. It begins beside his father. It begins with the sword that crossed the sea, now lying in fragments. Before Isildur takes anything, he has already lost almost everything. Numenor is gone. His brother Anarion is gone. His father now lies dead before him. The old world has collapsed. The new world has been bought with blood. And the thing that remains on Sauron's hands seems, in that moment, less like a temptation than like the last visible sign of the enemy who has caused so much grief. But grief can change the names of things. It can make a danger look like justice. It can make a trophy look like payment. It can make a man believe he is holding meaning when he is already being drawn towards ruin. It would be easy to make Isildur small. It would be easy to remember him only as a man who failed, the man who refused, the man who kept what should have been destroyed. But Tolkien does not give us a man who begins in cowardice or greed. He gives us someone more complicated. Years earlier, in the final days of Númenor, Isildur had already risked his life for something fragile, something powerless, something that could not defend itself. When the white tree, Nimloth, stood under threat, marked for destruction by those who no longer honoured what it meant, Isildur did not merely mourn from a distance. He went secretly into danger and took from the tree a single fruit, preserving a living sign of the faithful before the tree itself was destroyed. That moment matters because it tells us what kind of man he was before the ring ever came into his hands. He was not only proud, he was not only reckless, he was not merely waiting for a chance to grasp power. He was capable of courage, loyalty, reverence, and sacrifice. He understood, at least in part, that some things are worth saving precisely because they are fragile, and that memory is not preserved by sentiment alone, but by risk. The white tree survives because Isildur dared to act before it was too late. That is why his later failure hurts more, not less. If he were only a villain, there would be no tragedy. If he were only corrupt, there would be no wound in the story. The sorrow of Isildur is that the same man who once preserved the living sign of hope would later preserve the one thing that should have been destroyed. He knew how to save what was precious, but at Orodruin, he mistook the ring for something precious. Sauron is defeated. That must be said plainly. The last alliance has not failed. Elendil and Gil-galad have not failed for nothing. The long resistance of elves and men has reached the place where the Dark Lord's power can be broken, and in that terrible encounter, Sauron's bodily form is cast down. But Tolkien's world rarely lets victory remain simple. Evil is defeated, but not fully ended. The enemy is overthrown, but the ring remains, and that changes everything. Isildur takes up the hilt shard of Narsil, not the sword as it was, not the bright weapon of his father whole in his hand, but a broken blade, a fragment of what has just been lost. With that shard he cuts the ring from Sauron's hand, and in doing so he completes, in one sense, the work of which so many had died. The hand is severed, the ring is taken, the war is won, and yet the danger has not vanished. It has changed form. That is one of Tolkien's deepest instincts about evil. It does not always continue by appearing strong. Sometimes it continues by becoming smaller, quieter, easier to hold, easier to justify, easier to mistake for something that belongs to us. On Sauron's hand, the ring is the weapon of a tyrant. In Isildur's hand, it becomes something else, a relic, a token, a payment, a thing with a story attached to grief. And that is where the tragedy begins to narrow, because the ring no longer needs to look like the enemy. It only needs to look like compensation. Tolkien gives us a word that explains Isildur's first understanding of the ring. Wergild, a man price, a payment for the slain. Isildur claims the ring is Wergild for his father and his brother, and that single idea changes the emotional shape of the moment. He does not first name it as a weapon of which to rule. He does not first speak of using it to master others. He names it as payment for what has been taken. That does not make the choice right, but it does make it human. He has lost his father, he has lost his brother. He has watched the long war devour almost everything it touched. And now, in the ruin of battle, he takes from the hand of the defeated enemy something that seems to answer loss with possession. This is the terrible mistake. The ring cannot pay for Elendil. It cannot pay for Anarion. It cannot restore the dead, heal the wound, or make the victory whole. But grief wants form. It wants something to hold. It wants the unbearable absence to become an object that can be named, grasped, kept, and understood. So Isildur takes the ring, and here compassion must not become excuse. To understand Isildur is not to absolve him. His grief is real, but the choice is wrong. He mistakes grief for justice, and because he does, the wound of the Second Age is carried forward into the Third. That is the tragedy. Not that Isildur desired evil in its purest form, not that he stood there thinking himself the servant of darkness, but that he took into his keeping something he had no right to keep, and he gave that act a name that made it seem bearable. There is a moment after victory when the story could have ended differently. The ring could have been destroyed. The power that held Sauron's malice in the world could have been unmade. The long shadow could have been prevented from stretching forward into the lives of generations not yet born. But Isildur refused. Elrond and Círdan urged him to cast the ring into the fire, and we must let the seriousness of that counsel stand. This is not merely advice offered in uncertainty. It is the clear recognition that what has been taken from Sauron must not be preserved as a trophy. But Isildur does not obey it. He keeps the ring. This is where the episode must be honest. Isildur is not innocent. He is wounded, yes. He is grieving. He has acted bravely before, and he will not be reduced to a single failure. But he refuses the destruction of the ring, and that refusal matters. It matters because some choices are still wrong even when we can trace the pain behind them. It matters because grief can explain a decision without cleansing it. It matters because the great disasters in Tolkien's world are not always born from simple malice. Sometimes they begin when a wounded heart tells itself that what it wants is just. Isildur leaves with the ring in his keeping. The fire is behind him. The chance has passed. And the story that might have ended there begins to move forward again, now burdened by the thing that should have been unmade. At first, perhaps, the ring could still be thought of as Wergild, a sign of victory, a private memorial, a thing taken from the enemy in payment of the dead. But the ring does not remain what Isildur names it. Slowly, uneasily, its nature begins to show itself. Isildur records what he observes, its heat, its markings, its strange resistance to harm, the way it seems more than a mere ornament or treasure. He is not ignorant forever. He begins to understand that what he has taken is not simply a token of victory, not merely a payment laid upon the scales of grief. The thing he called Wergild is beginning to reveal a will of its own. That is the dreadful moment of this part of the story. The ring becomes less like an object and more like a claim. It is not content to be held as memory. It draws, presses, waits, and works upon the one who keeps it. And Isildur, who once thought he had taken possession of it, begins to appear less like the owner than its keeper for a time. There is a deep unease in that, because the tragedy of the ring is never only that people desire it, it is that they misjudge the relationship. They think they are holding it, but it is also holding them. Isildur travels north with a smaller company, away from the great places of memory and into lands where the war already feels more distant. Perhaps, for a little while, it seems that the worst has passed. The ring is hidden in his keeping, troubling perhaps, but not yet understood by the world as the danger it truly is. Then the ambush comes. At the Gladden fields, orcs descend upon the company, and the journey turns suddenly into disaster. The men with Isildur are overwhelmed. The shape of the story tightens. The great decisions of kings and councils give way to mud, fear, water, arrows, and flight. Isildur does not remain to die in a gesture of empty pride. He tries to escape, and even that is not simple cowardice. He is not merely preserving himself, he is carrying something whose danger he has begun to understand. And survival now seems to carry its own responsibility. If he dies here, what becomes of the ring? If it is taken, then what? So he goes towards the river. The water is cold, the current is strong, the battle is behind him, and in that moment of desperation, he puts on the ring. For a brief time, he vanishes from sight, but not from judgment, not from consequence, not from the strange will of the thing he thought he possessed, because the ring does not belong to him. And in the water, it leaves him. The invisibility falls, the arrows come, and Isildur, son of Elendil, dies not in the place where his father fell, not in the centre of a great battle, but in the river, in flight, betrayed by the very thing he had kept. When Isildur falls, the ring is not destroyed, it is lost. That difference shapes the Third Age. The sword remains broken, the king is dead. The ring has slipped from history into water, silence, and waiting. This is the hard truth at the centre of Isildur's story. His failure is not final in the sense that all hope is ended, but it is real. It has consequences. It leaves a shadow under which others will one day have to live, and choices not made by him will have to be faced by people not yet born. That is why we should neither flatten him into a villain nor soften him into innocence. He is braver than the simplest accusation allows. He is more mistaken than sympathy alone can bear. He saved the fruit of the white tree. He stood in the Line of Elendil. He cut the ring from Sauron's hand, and he kept it. All those things are true. Together, they make him tragic. And in Tolkien's world, tragedy is rarely useless, because even failure can become part of a longer mercy, when it is not allowed to have the final word. But the line does not end here. Somewhere beyond Isildur's death, beyond the river, beyond the broken remnants of war, the heirs of Elendil will continue into a harder and more hidden age. In the north, the realm that Elendil had founded did not fall in a single moment, as Numenor had beneath the sea, but slowly, through years that stretched into generations, as strength thinned and unity began to give way. The land remained, but the kingdom did not. What had once been Arnor was divided into smaller realms, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudal, each holding something of the old order, but none strong enough to to preserve it whole. And as division deepened, it did not merely weaken them, it opened the way for something else to enter. From the north came a shadow, not with the sudden violence of conquest, but with patience, pressure, and design. The realm of Angmar rose under the Witch King, a servant of the same darkness that had once been struck down. And the wars that followed did not break the kingdom all at once, but wore it down piece by piece. Fortresses fell, alliances failed, and what remained of the old strength diminished until at last the final remnant, Arthedain, was overcome, and with it the last visible kingship of the north came to an end. Tolkien records it simply, almost without emphasis, as though the fading itself were the meaning. The North Kingdom was broken, and its line of kings came to an end. And yet, it did not end. Because what disappears from history is not always what disappears from the world. When the crown was lost, the people were not. The Dunedain did not vanish with their kingdom. Instead, they withdrew, not in surrender, but in preservation, carrying with them what could not be rebuilt in stone. If you had travelled the roads of the north in those days, you might not have noticed them at all. The journey would pass without incident, the road would remain open, and whatever dangers lay beyond the edges of sight would never quite reach you. And yet, somewhere beyond the tree line, someone had been watching. He might have stood in the cold long after others had returned to warmth, listening to the quiet of the land and to what moved within it, ready to step forward if the unseen threat became real, and just as ready to remain hidden if it did not. By morning, there would be no sign he had ever been there. This was their life. Tolkien offers only a glimpse of it, as though even the telling must remain restrained. Strider was one of the Dunedain, the Rangers of the North, a remnant of the great people of the West. A remnant. Not a kingdom restored, but something carried forward in another form. These were not wanderers without history, but the heirs of a broken realm, the descendants of kings who no longer had thrones, moving through lands that had forgotten their origin, while still depending upon their presence. Their leaders were no longer crowned kings, but chieftains, a line that began with Aranath, the son of the last king, who chose not to claim what could no longer be held, but to preserve the people instead. The kingship had not ended, it had changed. And in that change, the meaning of Elendil's oath became clearer than it ever had been. They remained, moving quietly through lands that did not know their names, guarding borders that no longer belonged to them, and holding back dangers that would never become stories. To live this way is to accept a kind of life that offers almost nothing in return. No moments of recognition in which the world pauses to acknowledge what has been done, because the measure of their faithfulness is found in absence rather than presence. The village is not attacked, the road is not taken, the shadow does not spread, and so nothing is said. They carried a kingdom that no longer existed, not in territory, but in memory and identity, preserving what they had been given even when it could no longer be seen. They remembered the West when others had forgotten it. They kept the language, the customs, and the knowledge of a past that no longer shaped the world around them. And they did so without reinforcement, without recognition, and often without any assurance that what they preserved would ever be restored. This is what it meant to be Dunedain in the north. Not rulers, not even a visible people, but a remnant that refused to disappear. And all the while, the world continues as though none of this were happening. In the Shire, fields were tended and seasons passed with a quiet rhythm, and in Bree, travellers gathered and shared stories that rarely reached beyond the boundaries of their own experience. Tolkien hints at this hidden protection with characteristic restraint. They are the last of the Númenorians in the north, and they go about in secret, guarding the borders of the Shire. Guarding in secret. Their faithfulness is measured by what does not happen, by dangers turned aside before they can take form, by lives lived in safety without any knowledge of how close that safety once came to breaking. They are unknown because their work is successful. As generations passed, the burden did not lessen, it intensified. The line grew thinner, not stronger, and fewer remained to carry what had been entrusted to them. The memory of their origin became something that had to be actively preserved, passed from one to another with care, so that it would not be lost entirely to time. And yet the chieftains endured. From father to son, the line continued, not in halls of stone, but in hidden places, in lives shaped by moments and vigilance, in a kingship that existed only as promise. They remained, even as remaining became harder, even as the world forgot them, even as the lands they guarded ceased to remember who guarded them. And still, they did not abandon what had been given. And then, quietly, almost without announcement, something begins to shift. Far in the wild, in a place where memory is still kept, and the past is not yet entirely dimmed, a child is raised who does not yet know what he will one day carry. He grows among those who remember what the world has forgotten. Learning not only the skills of survival, but the history that gives those skills meaning. He is not yet a king, not yet a ranger in the full sense, not yet the one who will be seen, but he belongs to the line. And that line has not ended. He has been carried through silence, through obscurity, through generations that did not see the outcome of their faithfulness until it could arrive here. They were not the end of a kingdom. They were its continuation, in a form the world no longer recognized. No songs were sung of them. No crowns marked their passing. No great histories recorded their names. And yet, because they remained, not for a moment, not for a single generation, but for as long as it took, the line did not end. Not through strength, not through recognition, but through a quiet faithfulness that endured when everything else had been stripped away. They remained long enough. Aragorn enters the story almost without warning. He is not introduced with banners, heralds, or the clear sign of royal return, but through unease. He sits apart from the warmth and noise of the prancing pony, watching and listening while others look at him with suspicion. To the people around him, he does not appear as the heir of Elendil, nor as the last hope of the line of kings, but as a dangerous-looking wanderer whose knowledge of the wild seems almost troubling. And that matters, because this is what the line of the north has become. Not a throne in a bright hall, not a court gathering around an ancient crown, not a kingdom waiting openly for its lord, only a ranger in worn clothing, known by a name that sounds more like an insult than a warrior. Strider. The people of Bree do not understand what he is. The hobbits do not yet understand what he is. Even those who have lived under the quiet protection of the rangers do not know the debt they owe to men like him. And so when Aragorn first steps into the story, he carries not only the burden of his ancestry, but the loneliness of being misjudged by the very world he has served. Yet he does not withdraw from that service. He does not demand recognition before he acts. He does not wait until others understand his worth before choosing to protect them. Instead, he takes responsibility for frightening travellers being haunted by servants of the enemy, and in doing so, he becomes the bridge between the hidden labour of the Dunedain and the visible return of the king. This is the first thing we must understand about Aragorn. Before he is revealed, he serves. Before he is crowned, he guards. And before anyone speaks of kingship, he proves himself in the ordinary and dangerous work of keeping others alive. In this, he is not breaking from the hidden line. He is fulfilling it. He walks the same roads his forefathers guarded, keeps the same watch they kept, and accepts the same suspicion they endured. But in him, the long secrecy of the Dunedain is beginning to move towards its purpose. For generations, they watched from beyond the edges of the story. Now one of them must enter it. Aragorn does not become worthy of the crown simply because he is descended from kings. That would be too easy, and Tolkien rarely treats inheritance so cheaply. Blood may explain the claim, but it does not prove the man. Ancestry may place a burden upon him, but it does not guarantee that he is ready to bear it. For Aragorn to become more than a name preserved through generations, he must be formed by patience, discipline, service, grief, love, and long obedience. He is raised in Rivendell, under the care of Elrond, in a house where memory has not faded and the old sorrows of the world are still understood. There he learns who he is, and he learns the names behind him. Elendil, Isildur, the kings of the north, and the chieftains who endure after the crown was gone. But Rivendell does not give him merely information. It gives him perspective. It teaches him that the past is not something to be worn like an ornament, nor used as a weapon, nor claimed impatiently because it belongs to him by right. It must be understood. It must be suffered. It must be lived into slowly, until the person who receives it has become capable of holding it without being consumed by it. That is why Aragorn's hidden years matter. He does not spend them waiting idly for the world to discover him. He travels far, serves under other names, fights in distant lands, learns the strength and the weakness of men, and gains command before he ever receives a kingdom. He comes to understand not only the history of the people he may one day rule, but the danger, sorrow, courage, and frailty of the people he is called to serve. There are moments in Aragorn's story when his claim remains hidden, and there are moments when it must be spoken aloud, not for his own glory, but because only the heir can answer what has been left unresolved. The paths of the dead are one of those moments. This is not the road of an ordinary captain. It is not a daring strategy that any brave soldier could choose if only he had enough courage. Others fear that road for good reason, because it leads beneath the mountains, into the memory of a broken oath. But Aragorn goes there because he is not only leading men into battle, he is confronting a failure that was waiting for generations. Long ago, the men of the mountains swore an oath to Isildur, and when the hour came to fulfill it, they betrayed him. Because of that betrayal, they were cursed, and they lingered in unrest, bound to the words they had spoken and abandoned. Now Isildur's heir comes to them. That is the force of this moment. Aragorn does not summon the dead merely because he is brave. He calls them because he has the right to call them. He stands before the dead as the living representative of the house they once betrayed, and he gives them the chance to fulfill at last what they failed to fulfill before. Yet Tolkien does not reveal Aragorn only through command. He comes as a healer, moving among those whom the war has wounded in body, mind, and spirit. There is an old saying in Gondor: the hand of the king are the hands of a healer, and this is how the hidden king is recognized. Only after the road, the sword, the dead, the battle, and the healing does the crown come, and by then it feels different. The white tree blooms again, the city is renewed, the king is crowned, and for the first time in generations, the Line of Elendil is no longer hidden, whispered, or guarded only by those who remember what others have forgotten. It is seen, it is acknowledged, it stands in the light. But Tolkien does not make the return of the king feel like a simple return to the world before the fall. Aragorn is not Numenor restored, as though Numenor had never broken. He is not Elendil repeated without change, nor is Isildur corrected merely by stronger will. He is the heir shaped by everything the line has endured, by loss, exile, humility, patience, failure, hiddenness, and the long discipline of waiting. That is why the line endures. Not because one man possessed it, but because each generation gave it on. Aragorn comes to the end of his life by another road. He has ruled, he has restored, he has loved. He has received the crown that his fathers could only guard from afar. He has seen the white tree bloom and the kingdom renewed. Until next time, may you have the patience to carry what has been given to you, the wisdom to know when it is yours to hold, and the grace to recognize when it is time to pass it on.